would not be the same. Few people laughed. Few people cried. Most people were silent. I remembered the line from the Hindu scripture, the Bhagavad Gita. Vishnu takes on his multi-armed form and says, "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds."
Hey guys, Robert and Ingrid here, as we're going to be going over the entire retrospective on the Showa Era of Godzilla. The longest era, I might add. 15 films!
That is a lot of movie!
Yep, and divided into 3 eras. You had the original duology, which was just the first 2, Godzilla, Godzilla Raised Again. You had the revival era, that was from King Kong to Destroy All Monsters, and then you have the champion era, where Godzilla's more the defender of Earth and everything. The one that unfortunately people more think about when they think about Godzilla in the early days. And that was from Godzilla's Revenge, all the way down to the final one was Terra Mechagodzilla, before they finally decided, let's put Godzilla to rest for a decade.
Uh-huh.
So first of all, before we go into our top, our from worst to favorite to best, what did you think about this era?
Well, it was really neat to see what actually brought not just Godzilla, but kaiju as a genre as a whole into, like, public prominence. Like, hey, this was a brand new kind of, like, genre of entertainment that maybe Godzilla didn't start, but it certainly popularized.
Definitely.
And I can see a lot of what made that really happen, even if there definitely were some egregiously low points.
Definite, but there were more highs than lows, let's be honest.
Yeah, it's just like, it's kind of weird that Godzilla movies are kind of, seem to be remembered as, like, cheesy, corny movies, when it's just like, no, there's a bit more to them than that.
And the funny thing is, as bad as the dub is, I never really saw any of these, you know, the mouse flap and everything.
Yeah, at least did a decent job on that front.
Now the actors, though, are what you question about. You're like,
It's like, at least the actual writers and translators were on their game.
Yep, especially the old Godzilla. That's just as bad as Ghidorah.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, now that you've seen both Showa eras, how do you compare Godzilla to Gamera?
Well, let's just say it's not necessarily comparing the same number of movies, but Godzilla didn't necessarily reach the low point at Godzilla didn't necessarily reach the low point that some of the Gamera movies did, though it did definitely come close at a couple of times.
Yeah, but let's be honest, no one could get as low as Super Monster.
Yeah, let's just say it will be a cold day in hell before we have a movie that beats Super Monster as being our worst.
Yeah, but at least, I just blanked on the name now. Godzilla versus, Virus. That's more around the area of a lot of the low points of Godzilla. Wouldn't you say?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like Godzilla and Gamera kind of do different things, so it's kind of really hard to compare them one-to-one, because obviously Godzilla started as a walking metaphor, and sort of, and while that might have shifted a bit, that's sort of largely where his place was. Gamera just feels like it was more built to be fun, and there's nothing wrong with that.
And let's be honest, Gamera became the hero of children well before Godzilla did.
And you know what? Like I said, there's nothing wrong with that. It's just the movies are doing two different things.
Now, let's be honest though, Godzilla has the better monsters, let's be honest.
Yeah, Godzilla really does have the better monsters, but I'd have to say that there are definitely a lot more times where I feel like the Gamera fights are just a bit more fun and understand to be fun.
Exactly. I think because they also use models too for some of them. Mm-hmm. You know, like the ever-famous acrobatic sequence.
Oh, yes, that's the one that instantly jumps to mind. Where it's just like,
it's a model. It's a model. It's not even a guy in a suit. It's just like, woo, 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 and then it's the guy in the suit. You can't do that with Godzilla. The only time you ever saw that was during King Kong when he does his own, well, an earlier version of the drop kick. You know, the stop motion one. You remember that during their fight where he it goes stop motion for a second?
Yeah, it's just.
Yeah, but again though, but I will say this though, some of the non-iconic monsters that Godzilla faced, those ones like Ebera and a few others, those ones do not hold a candle to some of the Gamera ones. Yeah,
those ones just kind of feel like, hey, let's vaguely think of a giant version of an animal for Godzilla to fight, whereas it's just like, I remember, for example, we all went on about how, damn, Virus and, Theragon had just sort of, really striking designs.
Yep, or Zigra, and the most generic of Gamera was, hold on, let me double check quickly, hold on, I gotta make sure I got the right one. The most generic looking of him was the, oh, which one was it? Giran. Giran was the most generic looking.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. It's just like.
Oh no, not Giran. No, that's the knife one. That one.
Oh no, we're mixing them up already.
Jiger was the one that looked the most generic. You know, just this generic lizard.
Yeah, looked the most generic, though that one definitely had some of the best execution. But Godzilla, not Gamera.
Yeah, right. But just so much now, I definitely think the fights though overall were better though in Godzilla. There was a mastercraft to their monster fights.
Yeah, it's just like they're well choreographed. They get knocked down, drag out. They feel like they definitely get to the blood when there's really a point, and it's just like it's a lot more grounded by comparison. Yep.
Now that's for the bulk of the era. Once we get towards the Champion Era, that's where it
starts to go off the rails. Like, if you had translated stuff in the Champion Era into Gamera movies, it wouldn't have felt so bad because that's in character for Gamera to do. But for Godzilla, it's just weird.
Yep, and none of that though, but the use of stock footage and very cheap or poorly handled models like Ghidorah during Gigan. It's like the heads were so stiff. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And Megalon is still one of them. I did not mind the movie, but the monster design was just, what the heck is this, a beetle?
Yeah, it's just like... And you're putting it next to a monster that actually had some good construction.
We got Gigan. Oh, but then they had to nerf Gigan by having him be more of a dummy instead of the sadist that he was in the last one.
Yeah, and it's just like, man, Gigan had 2 movies and neither of them was he the star.
Yep. Now let's also talk about the human stories. I can see why people, after rewatching the show, I can see why people have problems with human stories. They're a mixed bag.
Mm-hmm. Some of them are a lot more decent. Some of them are even pretty great, like with Terror of Mechagodzilla.
Oh, yeah.
Ones, it's just like, I could not even comprehend the human stories at all.
Revenge!
For all of the things that Gamera got wrong at its low points, I feel like I could still at least understand the basic human plot most of the time, even if I knew that it was terrible.
I'll say this, though, at least Godzilla only had one annoying Ichi-level kid. Gamera gave us Ichi!
Yeah, we only had one of those.
And that was Revenge again.
Which was the undisputed low point, at least.
We'll go over that when we get to there, but also, let's also talk about the cause of a lot of the fights. The fact that, let's be honest, it's almost like feel like half of them were alien invasions once they introduced the premise.
Yeah, it's sort of reached a point where, do you have any other plot ideas, Toho?
Again, sometimes it works. Sometimes it works. Destroy all monsters, both of the Mechagodzillas.
Sometimes it works, but other time it just sort of feels like we need to come up with an antagonist, and this is the one we're familiar with, so let's do that.
And boy, and they came up with so many. You had cockroaches. You had apes from a black hole. You had from Martians. You had from Planet X.
Yeah, and it's just like, it is kind of funny to see some of this stuff, since obviously a lot of this stuff was before we got a lot more into the space travel thing, so it's just kind of funny, like, oh, old 60s and 70s movies, you had such high hopes for sci-fi.
At least Gamera only had 2 alien, well, 3 if you count super monsters, but 2 from the regular Showas.
Yeah, and both of them were significantly different enough from each other.
Exactly. I mean, you had the space bitches. No, I tell you about it, it was 3. It was 3. Because you had Zigra, you had the space bitches for Giran, and you had Virus.
Yeah, and all of those had significantly different sorts
of... Oh, yeah, very different.
Whereas here it's just sort of like, okay, we have this alien race that's coming in and they take control of a monster, and maybe they're a little bit aesthetically different or from a different place, but it's essentially just a palette swap of the same antagonist.
Exactly. And again, depending on how they handle it, it could have been good, but for the most part, it was just lazy. Let's just get to the point.
Yeah, it's just like, you can very clearly tell it's a plot contrivance at that point.
Yep. Now, let me ask you this then. Favorite of the non-Big G monsters?
I think I gotta go with my girl Mothra on this one.
Definitely Mothra.
I feel like that's a bit more of a vanilla choice, but she's just cool. I kind of missed her in the later movies.
I know, and then she only regained her normal form in Sea Monster, and then reverts back to the worm.
It's just like, come on, why you gotta do my girl dirty like that?
Exactly, and I still love, now, Rodan, I don't mind, but I think so many times he's overhyped.
Yeah, it just sort of feels like he's like the advertised extra, basically.
Now, my boy Angerus, he's the real best bud of Godzilla.
Oh yeah, and it's a shame that he's not remembered more, and honestly, even the movies do him dirty sometimes, like...
Mechagodzilla!
Yeah, it's just like, come on, dude, he's the OG, why you gotta play him like that?
And unfortunately, I don't think you're ever gonna see him again going forward.
Aww.
Yep, so him getting his jaw ripped open, Terra might be the last time you ever see him.
Sad face.
Yep. But if I had to pick an all-time favorite, it's still Mechagodzilla.
Ah, I can understand that.
Although Ghidorah, he was only a threat once.
Yeah, he was only really a threat once, despite how many times he appeared, because other times it's just like, oh, it's Ghidorah, and it sort of feels like it's banking off his past hype, rather than actually being written well later.
Now, the only other time he was a threat was, let's be honest, destroy all monsters. That was the only other time, but by that point, he's so ganged up on it, it's not even fair. It's like, why'd you even bring him in here?
Yeah.
It's like, why'd you bring him in here, just to kill him off? Which they did.
Yeah, it's just like...
Now, I will also say, now, what did you say about Godzilla here? Do you think his transition from monster to hero was natural? Do you think it was like, you can see why Ishiro Honda was so disgusted?
I can sort of see both sides. There are some places where the character development feels a lot more natural, where there are some cases where it just starts as Godzilla more or less wanting to shoo somebody else off his turf, and it just so happens to help humanity, to understanding, hey, maybe I should care more about some entities that aren't myself and son of Godzilla. Then maybe starting to learn how to work more with some of the other monsters. But then in other cases, it just got taken a little bit too far when Ishiro Honda wasn't at the reins.
Exactly.
So you could say that there was some natural development there that made some sense. Like, I feel like it made its most sense of Godzilla as more of a good guy in the Smog Monster movie, because it's just
his planet. It's his planet, too.
Mm-hmm.
And even then, it's like he wasn't trying to go after Ghidorah. Not at first. At first, he was more like, hey, knock it off.
Yeah, and it's just like, that's where you start getting a bit of like him as sort of like the Gaia's vengeance characterization, where it's just like a force of nature that sort of like protects the Earth, though not necessarily humanity.
Exactly, but then Gigan and Megalon, what the heck was Godzilla doing? I mean, okay, I know Gigan kind of got their attention.
Yeah, it sort of feels like Godzilla was kind of slotted into the hero role, not because it made sense for his character, but because Godzilla is somebody that people actually recognized at that point.
Exactly. You could put any other monster, but it just happened to be Godzilla.
Uh-huh.
And then Megalon, again, I like Megalon better than Gigan, but again, it just felt like no point was needed. But again, once you get to Mechagodzilla, though, oh no, it's back to being how he was in the revival era.
Yeah, and it's just like, alright then, that's more like the Godzilla that I recognize. That grumpy son of a bitch.
Too little, too late, though, unfortunately. But, okay, shall we get into our and listing all these 15 movies? From worst to best. Hold on, let me first share my screen. Hold on. Oh, come on. Give me 1 second. Let me just do one other thing quickly. Okay, I don't want anyone to see our list, so I don't want them to see the notepad and spoil our list.
Yeah. So, we don't want to ruin the suspense.
No, we don't. I want them to show the posters, but you know, not the list.
Where we're gonna put them in.
Exactly. So, okay, the first one. Let's be honest. It's not going to be much of a surprise.
Yep, the dead bottom of the list is, of course.
Hold on, let me get it.
Or.
Oh, no, that wasn't it. That wasn't it.
Yep.
Godzilla's Revenge.
Yup, that's the dead bottom because.
Now this poster makes it look awesome, doesn't it?
It does. Unfortunately, the movie sucks.
Oh, beyond sucks. I mean, it's one, like you would say before, it's one of those where it's just Godzilla, a movie that just happened to have Godzilla in it.
Mm-hmm. It's just like, yeah, I can kind of see what Ishiro was going here, but it's just like, that just doesn't feel like the kind of movie that Godzilla is normally built for. And I think on some degree he knows it too.
Yeah, and then the fact that it ruins whatever goodwill you have for Minya, especially after Destroy All Monsters.
Yeah, it's just like, Minya was at least okay, but at this movie, it's just like, the second he talks, it's just like, what the hell is happening here?
And again, I get it. We're supposed to not take it as this is actually the monsters doing it. So technically, you could say the monsters weren't even in here, so why the heck were we watching it?
Yeah, it's just like,
But even the kid was Ichi level. He was, I never thought we could actually get a Godzilla version of Ichi, but we did.
We found him somehow.
Yeah, he was just as bad. Although I do think, I cannot tell. Who would you say was worse, Ichi or him?
I'd probably have to say Ichi, honestly.
Yeah, because this kid was not dumb enough to think that he was really interacting with them. He did think to a degree he was interacting with the monster, but not as blindly as thinking, hey, Gamera's my pet turtle.
Yeah, it's just like...
That's where Ichi was brain dead. And at least also this kid at least strayed out of it. Whereas Ichi kept on going into the fight and it's like, you idiot!
Yeah, and eventually I think the kid understood on some level that like, oh, this isn't a little bit more that this wasn't really, just got really into it.
Yep. Although, again, what was up with the kid humping the car? Even when you saw it, you probably had this like, look on your face, right? Like,
Yeah, it's just like, what am I watching?
Alright, next. Gigantes the Fire Monster, aka Godzilla, raids again.
Ah, yes.
The sophomore slump.
Mm-hmm. It's just like, yeah, it wasn't great, but on the other hand, it was literally the second movie, so they still had some figuring out to do. So
now,
at least gets a pass on that front.
But unfortunately, though, and while it did set some of the standards, not that well.
Yeah, it's just like, okay, we're setting the standards of the monster fight, but the human plot was just kind of bland and all over the place.
Now, we're not marking points out because this dub was so atrocious. We're not. That does not affect this.
It's just that
they didn't know what they were doing. They were flailing.
It's just like they probably weren't expecting the first one to blow up like it did, and when you're following up, it's just like you have a case of beginner's luck, and then you try to recreate that, and it takes a while for you to nail what made the original so good.
And that's why they put Godzilla on ice literally and held off for another couple of years before he would come back.
Mm-hmm. And that's another case where taking a creative break really seems to have helped it.
Yep, especially allowed them to build up more monsters going on. We would get Rodan, we would get Mothra, we would get other monsters as well.
Yep, and then you can sort of like, hey, let's bring them in and see what happens when we put them together.
Now, next one on our list, Godzilla versus the Sea Monster. Or AKA, oh, it was King Kong, but we just slapped Godzilla onto it.
Yeah, and you can pretty clearly tell at the bits that really should have been redacted, or altered, but were not.
Especially or should I take Godzilla finds love?
It's just like...
What?
Sorry, what?
And why did they keep that part in? The only saving grace I would give this one is that this is the only other time we see full-grown Mothra.
Yeah, this is like the only time we see that, and I like that for Miguel, but it's just like, why?
And this poster makes it look better, doesn't it?
Yeah, it really does, when in reality, it's a convoluted mess of a human plot and a pretty bland monster fight.
And I would say this is definitely I would say this, I mean, now, what makes this above Rage is, well, Mothra for one, and two, they still had some semblance of, cohesion.
Yeah.
That is the problem that Rage again has. It was the flailing around and not knowing what to do.
Yeah, this at least they had some ideas. Not very well executed ideas, but ideas.
Exactly. So I did want to make that clear, but this one, I would still say, though, this was more the worst of the revival era. This was definitely the worst of the revival era.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? From King versus King Kong all the way down to Destroy All Monsters. This was hands down the worst of that.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, next we have Godzilla on Monster Island, aka Godzilla versus Gigan.
Yeah.
Gigan's the only saving grace of this movie.
Yeah, otherwise it's just...
And the tower.
Yeah, it's like, it started with some neat stuff, and then it just kind of fell in on itself.
Like, they bring in Ghidorah when he wasn't needed. You had the talking sequence. You had the alien invaders or cockroaches.
Yeah, it's just like, what are you on, movie?
Again, Gigan's the only saving grace, because he's an awesome monster. I mean, come on, the buzzsaw. Although, this is also the bloodiest of the movies. And
in more of a gratuitous way.
Yeah, especially, why the hell is Angus charging into the blades?
It's just like, come on, dude, you're smarter than that.
Yeah, it's like, and he does it twice.
Yeah, it's just like, who are you, Worf? Are you only here to get your ass kicked to establish how bad this new monster is?
And this was the worst handling of Ghidorah, period. Like,
Ghidorah just kind of felt like he was smacked on.
It's like, you know what? I almost look at him in Destroy All Monsters as a mercy killing if he was this bad beforehand.
Yeah.
Doesn't it feel like a mercy killing if this is before Destroy All Monsters chronologically?
Yeah.
I mean, especially again with the effects were horrible. What the hell was up with like his necks being so stiff?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? There was no life to him at all. It's just like, Moving on. Speaking of Ghidorah. Invasion of the Astro Monster.
Yes, we're starting to pick up a little bit more.
Yeah, but the first of the alien invasions, and the one that kind of derailed any good sense Ghidorah had.
Yeah, it's just like, initial introduction, wow, this monster is terrifying. Godzilla is just grumpy, but Ghidorah is actively malicious, and now this is the point where he starts being somebody else's puppet.
Yep, and some people there's some people who say this is better than versus Ghidorah to a degree.
We don't agree.
I don't agree entirely at all. I can see why some might see that, but I do not agree. And it's basically, this is more or less Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster told with a bigger budget to the point where the budget kind of, blinded them.
Mm-hmm.
And they overdid it, and the human plot was not the worst, but this is where it started the trouble signs.
Mm-hmm.
But after this one, we have Godzilla versus Megalon. Look at that!
Oh damn!
But that poster makes no sense, does it?
No, it really doesn't.
They're big. I mean, it obviously this is done because you had the King Kong '76 movie or so, or whatever. You know what I mean? But this, it's like there's one. They plow, and they're not that small. They're not that small.
No, they should be crushing those buildings.
But Megalon, and we put it up higher on the list because there is more good to it, but not a whole lot.
Yeah.
For one, Megalon, the worst of the monster designs, I'm afraid.
Yeah, it's just the most generic, let's be real.
But it still had some good bits, like the alien stuff was not that bad because it deals with the ocean, people in the ocean, and they only get help from aliens with, well, the cockroaches and Gigan.
Mm-hmm.
And we get Gigan second go around, but he's wasted here. But the human plot was not the worst.
Yeah, there at least was still something decent underneath there. It's just, yeah, one of those cases where it wasn't fully executed on to its full potential.
But still a lot better than Astro Monster and all that.
Mm-hmm.
The Astro Monster also was dull. Wouldn't you say?
Yeah, that one was just like, am I watching a Godzilla movie or am I watching a political thriller?
Yeah, at least here though, Godzilla at least had more to do, but... Oh, and Jet Jaguar!
That was at least interesting to start, because it's like, ooh, ocean. Ooh, ocean exploration. Ooh, giant thing. But
yeah,
then
a mech
just kind of fell apart.
Yeah, ooh, a mech that actually turned giant size. And come on, the theme song is pretty good too, isn't it?
Yeah, it's
Jet. He's Ultraman.
Mm-hmm.
All
and it
right.
was sort of like interesting to see a non-kaiju combatant, but yeah.
Yep. Next we've got Son of Godzilla.
Ah!
This was fun.
Mm-hmm.
This was better than I remembered it. Mostly because I kept mistaking most of the stuff, the crap from Revenge, for being in here. Here,
this
it
one is just, well, it's a believable story of Godzilla becoming a parent, first at not giving a crap about the kid, but then slowly learning how to accept responsibility and having a surprisingly wholesome ending.
But still being an ass, like when he's threatening to hit him.
Uh-huh, it's just like, yeah, it's like roughly Godzilla as you'd expect him in that position.
In other words, they don't domesticate Godzilla. He's still a dick.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I mean,
he's
the fact
just
that
a dick that happens to also care about his kids somewhat.
Hold on. We're gonna have to pause a second. Hi, Dad. We're still recording. Okay, I'll close the door and keep your voice down, please. Pause a second. So my dad's gonna be taking some stuff out in the other room, but we can still continue. All right?
Yeah.
All right. Sorry about that, folks. We're continuing on. If you hear noise in the background, got some stuff that's going to be going on, but continuing on. But yeah, this, though, it was more wholesome than I thought.
Yeah, and it's just like, and it wasn't out of place wholesome, too. It was well executed.
The only downside is Minya's design.
Yeah, that was the main thing.
This is better. This is better. This one here is much better, wouldn't you say?
Mm-hmm.
Next we got The first of the revival, the big one, King Kong versus Godzilla, and is it the classic everyone remembers it as? Not really.
Not really, but it's also not awful.
Oh, it's not.
It definitely has its moments. There are definitely some points where it's just like, yeah.
If it wasn't for this, Godzilla, I don't think Godzilla would become the big name. This is what helped skyrocket Godzilla after the first two movies.
And you have to at least respect that, even if it's seen at times to be more spectacle than substance.
Definitely. And you could tell the love for King Kong in here, right down to the fact they included the natives. Far better, for worse.
That doesn't necessarily age too well in the modern day.
No, but remember, this was way back in the 60s or so.
Mm-hmm. Gotta remember that context.
Yep, but again, no. And Kong, he looks like roadkill, let's be honest.
Yeah, that was just... But at the same time, I don't think Kong was ever supposed to be very pretty.
You know, but he's the hero here. He is definitely the hero.
Yep, that's undisputed.
Yep,
he's the one they bring in to stop Godzilla from wrecking things.
Exactly. Even though he's... And I do not like when they're saying how, oh, Godzilla is an idiot, whereas Kong is a thinking animal. It's like, what the hell makes you think that Godzilla is an idiot?
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, I do not like when they shill, even the bad guy, they shill the good guy, you know what I mean? It's like, really? I mean, what did you think about that during their... I mean, I liked, in general, them dissecting and talking about them, but I did not like their conclusions.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, the idea of what made Kong so big was those berries made sense.
Yeah, it's just like, you have an unusual diet, you're gonna have effects in you that you're not gonna see elsewhere.
Also, I gotta say, this had some of the funnest human characters.
Oh yes, it was kind of fun to watch the guys basically be like sports commentators, and they had some real zingers in there.
Not just that though, but also the stuff like the space, that wire or whatever. Like, stop it, you're not Tarzan, and
yeah, let's just say it. The guy
the dub was fun. The dub was fun.
Yeah, there was also that one guy who originally had King Kong because he wanted to make
I'm sick of Godzilla.
It's just like, hey, come on, you're leaving me out here.
Yep, but I also love the he said it's when they were talking with the natives, like, he said it's all right for you to stay, but if the giant monster comes down here, he cannot be held responsible if he eats you up. Fair enough. It's just like, again, just some of this stuff. He's like, yeah, he said, buddy cannot be held responsible if the monster comes down here and eats you up. And you can just tell the other guy's like, yeah, sure, whatever. But then the other guy's like, shouldn't we go? Oh, come on. But that feels a lot like, because we've seen the Peter Jackson Kong. I still haven't done the video yet, but it kind of, that guy feels a little bit like Jack Black's character.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? The director a little bit. This whole like, oh, sure, whatever.
Yeah. But it's sort of like done a bit more for laughs here.
Yeah.
In a way that makes sense.
Yep, and I'll say this. As cringy as the natives are, though, there is still a little bit of respect with their traditions.
Mm-hmm.
You gotta admit to that, right? Like the drums and everything. Like, the music was awesome.
Yeah, the music definitely was awesome, and they definitely did end up playing a role, and it's just like, hey, Kong's down, let's play the song of the people on his island to help get him up again.
Exactly, and now where the heck they got the recording, I don't know. But yeah, though, but overall, though, this was still fun. This was definitely fun, and this was the first fun one we got when we were going through this whole movie, Showa Era.
Mm-hmm.
So next we've got Ghidorah, the three-headed monster, the first of the crossovers.
Mm-hmm.
And this was really good.
Yeah, not necessarily as polished as later movies, but still really good.
Yep, and Ghidorah at his most evil.
Mm-hmm. Like I said before, Godzilla has usually been pretty grumpy, but Ghidorah is downright malicious.
But the thing is, though, the fact you had Rodan and Godzilla just keep fighting, and what finally got him to go after Ghidorah was when Ghidorah was knocking Mothra around.
Yeah, it's just like Mothra's
hey.
the one who kind of has to be the voice of reason.
Yeah, but the fact that it also shows that Godzilla has standards. He's like, hey, I may be an asshole, but I'm not going to beat after a little baby like Mothra.
It's just like, hey, it's the slimmest bit of character development that makes sense.
Exactly. And again, the storytelling was actually pretty good and everything. And like I said, Ghidorah is just a monster. And I mean that in all sense of the word. He is just vicious. And the fact that he went after Mothra, who again is a baby.
It's just like, what the hell, dude? It's not even a threat to you.
Yeah, all you can do is just web you up. That's all. Now, then again, we saw what the webbing does to Godzilla, so... Although it is sad to know that there's only one left, the other one died. But yeah, overall, this was a surprising good one for the first main, Monster Mash. Not the last, but next we've got Godzilla versus the Smog Monster. This
was the good trip.
This was the good trip. Very well done. I know a lot of people like to pit this up as a bad one. I don't agree. I think,
feel like,
if nothing else, it's a polished turd, if anything else.
Yeah, Ghidorah is a really, really, really interesting monster.
Definitely one of the best designed.
Yeah.
Having multiple forms.
Yeah, and sort of like having sort of an established power source in universe that's just like, hey, does the Godzilla thing of making you think about stuff that humans do that's not so good.
That's the other thing. I can see where the director was coming from. He wanted this to be similar to what Godzilla 1954 was. I don't think he nailed it.
But he definitely landed in the same ballpark. Even
oh yeah, he was in the ballpark. He was. I would say he made a pop ball. He got a pop fly. He didn't get a home run. He didn't even get to a base, but he got a pop fly. Is that a good way of putting it?
Yeah.
Because this was still good. This is very good, but this is also the time where you see like Godzilla becoming friend to everyone. Ugh.
Yeah, it's just like, that's just taking it a little bit too far.
But it's still at least acceptable because it's, Godzilla's home.
Too.
Yeah, but I will say this has the highest body count since the first one. At least on-screen body count. I mean, good God, we see some of them turn to skeletons, and this, I would put this kid up there with the one from Barugon from Gamera. Would you agree with that?
That
he had a point.
Makes sense.
Yeah, he had a point. He wasn't annoying, and he was just a good kid. And now there's some trippy moments. The fish head sequence that he would.
A lot of the music was good, but a little bit weird at times.
Yep. The Godzilla launching himself, something you don't see every day. But overall, though, this movie was just better than it has any right to be.
Yeah, it really does.
And I would definitely say, besides, of the Champion era, that this is the best one that wasn't Mechagodzilla related. Yeah. I would put this in, well, you can definitely tell where it is on the list, obviously, but there's a reason why it's this high up in the top, right shy of the top 5, because it deserves it. Like I said, if it's bad, I would call it a well-polished turd. At least it looks good, nice, at least. It may be bad in many regards, but it looks so nice.
Good presentation.
Yep. Although I gotta say with this poster, who the heck is that woman supposed to be?
Yeah, that just seems a bit egregious. Like, there's nothing like that in the movie.
Now, this was the 60s, around going into the 70s, so you gotta get some people's attention somehow.
Yeah, I guess so.
Next, that's Mothra.
What?
This is how they advertise Godzilla versus the Thing.
What?
Read it all. Just read it.
That doesn't look like the movie I watched.
I think they did because they knew you couldn't advertise it and get people's attention if you had a cute, adorable moth.
Yeah, that's fair.
But this is going overboard. I wonder how many people walked out of the theater.
Yeah, this seems like false advertising, but the actual Mothra movie itself, very good. Very good.
This set the high standard for a while.
This was my sort of like my high mark for quite a while viewing the Showa era.
Definitely, and for good reason. Godzilla, one of the best Godzilla suits.
Oh yeah.
But Godzilla's not perfect because he was clumsy. He tripped during his first march. And but Mothra, definitely our first hero, straight on hero character. And sacrifices herself.
Yeah.
And now, granted, would set the standard for Mothra that would get overdone in later incarnations, but for here, it worked. I love the fairies, the little twins. They were adorable.
The natives are pretty damn neat. You sort of get this idea that it's just like, hey, they're just sort of vibing in nature and vibing with their benevolent moth guardian.
Exactly. Yeah, the final fight was good because Mothra sacrificed herself, her babies are born, and they both take him down. And now, granted, we know later one of them died later of its injuries, but the fact that both of them at least lived long enough to stop Godzilla.
Yeah, it was a really unexpected finish that was really good.
Yep, a bit. I wouldn't say it was one of the best finishes, but it could have been worse. I'll say that.
Yeah. Obviously, there's more impressive ones later on, but it really made the impression of a surprise when I first viewed it.
It's only a shame that this was besides Ebera, the only other time we would see adult Mothra in the actual Godzilla titles. But going next, further in the top 5, Godzilla versus the Kha'zix Monster, aka the first Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla. This was definitely the best and one of the best. The two Mechagodzillas were the best of the revival era. Hands down. And it just, what can I say about this? This was, and this is why, there's a reason why people love Mechagodzilla so much.
Yeah, it's just like, what a hell of an iconic appearance.
Oh yeah, especially when we're introduced, you think, oh my god, Godzilla's being a villain again. What the heck is he doing? Why does he sound so weird? Like, wait, what's he doing to Ingrid? Oh god, Ingrid!
Yeah, and then it's just like you sort of reveal the metal shell, and it's just like,
I still love Godzilla's look. He's just like, just that look, that dog-like look. He's like, wait, what the? And then he shoots him again to reveal more. And best aliens. These were the best aliens.
This was the best aliens. They had a plan. They had some unique designings. They were really cunning and devious.
They were more so in the next movie, but that's not for a little bit. But here, though, they were good. And even when we reveal their true form, they are still putting up a fight. They're not like the cockroaches where they're like, ugh. Yeah,
it's just like they reveal them, and then the human characters are dealing with basically a feral ape.
Yep. Now I will say this is some of my favorite of the Showa Era humans. Right when we're introduced to the girl and her. Now, unfortunately, we don't remember most of their names, unfortunately. But when we're introduced to like the girl and the guy, and they meet the scientist, it's like, why didn't you tell me the scientist was your uncle? I'm sorry, I couldn't help but making fun of you. You're rude. Again, stuff like that is actually okay. It's very old-fashioned, you know what I mean? For back then, it is a little sexist, but it's funny in its way, you know what I mean? But yeah, overall, this is some of the best fights. This was some of the best fights. King Caesar, take him or leave him. You know what I mean? I see why people like him. I never really did.
Yeah, at least the cultural elements surrounding King Caesar were pretty neat.
Except for the singing.
Yeah!
Again, we said in the other review, doing it once would have been fine. Twice, and it was already a long song, you already knew was padding. That was I think that was the worst padding in the whole series, wouldn't you say?
Well, I mean, the worst padding outside of outright using stock footage.
Well, yeah, obviously. I'm saying the worst was new footage. That was the most egregious. And then Godzilla gaining lightning magnetic abilities right out of nowhere. But it did have some of Godzilla's best expressions, I think. You know what I mean? Especially when, when he's using the lightning, he's like, like, come on, come on. That was clever. How they took him down was great. But they left things hanging, though. They did leave some things hanging enough for there to be a sequel. But overall, though, this was a great starting of a return to form. But let's get to the next one. where it all began.
Oh yeah!
Godzilla, King of the Monsters. There's a reason why this is considered a classic. Even the English version,
some waves.
And even the English version, it respected itself. When we get to the Heisei era, that one not so much, but this one definitely respected it. And now that poster, it looks both goofy and yet menacing, doesn't it? And remember, the English translation, this is some of the best I've seen.
Sadly, I didn't get around to watching the original Japanese, but yeah, it was still a pretty good way of localizing and dubbing it while still staying true to the original spirit of it.
I still say this is the best out of all of the Showa. Would you agree with that? This was definitely the best out of all the Showa?
Definitely the best dub, yeah.
Yeah, that's what I meant. The best dub out of the Showa. And because again, but it just set up so much stuff. And the fact that this Godzilla is dead and that basically his death was pretty much a symbolic just as much of the bomb itself that created him. You know, the oxygen destroyer and everything, just, good Lord, this was just so amazing. And the message was so on point.
So on point and needed at the time.
Yep. And this just introduced so much and yet deconstructed so much. So next, Terror of Mechagodzilla.
Oh boy, yeah, the best human plot in the entire Showa.
Yep. Hands down, and this is the only one where it was the majority of the movie, but we didn't care. We were that invested. Yeah, it's just like so many questions around scientific ethics. Could you versus should you? Yep, and you had you had both the return of a great monster with Mechagodzilla and the introduction of a sympathetic one that just didn't deserve what it got done to it. And then Godzilla back to being a badass. It's just like, rarely do you have a movie that makes me feel an emotion other than, oh, hey, that's awesome. And here it made me, like, actually on the verge of crying feels. Oh, yeah, and again, for both the humans and for Titanosaurus. I mean, that cry of it, you just knew. Again, it is one of Godzilla's most dangerous foes. But if none of this had happened, Godzilla wouldn't have even known he existed. Which, now that I think about that, maybe that's why Godzilla took him down, because he realized how dangerous this guy was. What do you think? Do you think that could have been a reason? Yeah, potentially more of a pragmatic reason, like, hey, you may not want to do harm yourself, but clearly the situation shows that that your intentions are the only defining factor here. Exactly, and I'll be honest though, out of all of this, I think Mechagodzilla had a better showcase in the first one that he did here, but he was that looming threat that was coming up. But when we finally got it, it did feel a little lackluster compared to the last one, wouldn't you say? Yeah, it's just like, it was kind of hard to beat the spectacle of that one, but this one managed to go straight for the throat, emotionally speaking, and that more than made up for it. Oh yeah, and again, we knew how much of a threat Mechagodzilla was, and he still brought it. It's just the fact there was just one big fight in this whole movie as opposed to a couple of smaller fights. But I still love Godzilla's expression and how vicious he was. I mean, again, just that fact when you see Titanosaurus running off, he's just like, I'm out of here. No, you don't. I was ticked at Godzilla. I was pissed off at him. I mean, weren't you? Yeah, it's just like, look, I know that you're an asshat, but come on! Just let him go! Yeah, it's just like, he's not a problem anymore! Yeah, he's running with his tail between his legs. And then the bit with Mechagodzilla when he tries to do the same finishing move and didn't work this time, Godzilla's like, you could tell he was ticked off. He's like, oh, damn it, I gotta keep fighting. But again, throughout all this was a great send-off for the Showa era. It didn't end on a goofy note. It ended on a serious note. And it bookended it right where it began. Exactly. still feel bad for Ishiro Honda because it's kind of disillusioning him.
It's just like, come on. That man really didn't deserve that.
Yeah, not the lowest box office of the franchise. That still bites. When Godzilla Revenge did better.
Yeah.
But the last but not least, the chronological grand finale, Destroy All Monsters.
Woo!
This was a spectacle. This was the end game. This was
it was Endgame before Endgame was a thing.
Exactly. This was the great finale. Even though technically the final fight is kind of a womp womp. But overall, this was definitely the best overall alien invasion story. Not the best alien invaders, that was Mechagodzilla, but definitely the best overall alien invading story, where they can basically gather up all of the aliens, take them under their control, and then have them attack all the other cities.
Yeah, the absolute spectacle of seeing it all around the world was just, you could really feel it was just kind of like a global threat, and it's just like, what way to sort of ratchet up the stakes for the chronological finale.
Yep, I mean, this was meant to be the final movie because they weren't doing so hot, but then after this, everything went gangbusters. And also, the best use of Minya, definitely.
Oh yeah, basically letting the kid grow up and come of age.
A little, not exactly, but a little. But you have, again, everyone is there, but then you bring Ghidorah in. Now, I get why. He's the most dangerous and evil of them, but good God, this wasn't fair.
Yeah, it's just like...
Especially, kind of like Titanosaurus, once they lose control, you can so tell that Ghidorah probably like, hey, what's going on? Oh, crud.
I feel like that could have worked slightly better if they started out under alien control, but then it's just like he was able to break with it and go like, hey, I just allied with the aliens because I want to see you assholes burn. Exactly.
It felt like once he was released, it's one of those cases that I hate, where once it was the controller who was making him more dangerous. Why not have it be it was restraining him?
Yeah, where it's just like, oh, we wanted to use Ghidorah in a guided missile way, and on his own, he was like,
screw you! I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna unleash his malevolent side, which we have seen. But again, that's
on the whole, though.
Yeah, fantastic. On the whole, though, exactly. On the whole, if they were to end it here, this was the best place. But it's funny enough, we go. This number one was the original intended ending, and our second favorite is the one that actually was the ending. But yeah, and overall though, yeah, this was just fantastic. This was just fun. This was the most fun. Everyone had a moment to shine, at least those whose suits were still in good shape and not having to rely on stock footage. And it ends with them being on Monster Island, and everyone's happy-go-lucky.
Yep, they don't need to assault anymore because they got their home and they defeated the one guy who actually was, like, intentionally evil.
Exactly. I mean, I guess that means I saved us some Megalon, and Gigan was killed off in Megalon, I guess. But yeah, so yeah, hold on, let me stop sharing. So yeah, overall though, this whole era was just great, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was its own treat to watch, especially if, like, you're like me and you're recovering from a really bad injury and just want some nice old monster movies to watch.
Exactly, and just, like I said, I could see where it had its highs and its lows. I could see how it got to where it was, where they decided to put it on ice. A bit unfortunate in that regard, but it was needed. And this whole era, just in general, yeah, it set so many standards. But eventually, Godzilla does return after a decade. And we're going to take, well, for us in person, we're going to take some time off. For you guys, it's still going to be tomorrow. But we're going to meet up in person this time and do my favorite era of Godzilla. It's not the Showa one. I love the Showa one, but my favorite era has always been the Heisei era. All 7 movies that make up the 80s and 90s, as we tune in to the only era that had a continuous storyline from beginning to end. So tune in next time as we start that off with Godzilla and Return of Godzilla, aka Godzilla 1985. Unfortunately, the quality's not going to be so good, but what are you going to do when they don't have a Blu-ray out?
Mm-hmm.
See you guys
I'm excited for that.
Yep. See you guys then. Take care.